I took 4 gram dose, and so it's a pretty heavy dose. But it's so funny, like when the journey started, I was laying on my back and like starting to kind of experience the sensation of colors and all the things, and it was almost like this portal opened up in front of me. We're sitting in duality of this right or wrong or good or bad, when if we can kind of bring all that together into oneness and unity.
What was your first experience of oneness, and what was that actually like for you?
Yeah. Well, and I think prefacing this, for me, I'm up to this point, I had never smoked marijuana. I'd never done any recreational drugs, nothing like that. But like I said, plant medicine called me, and it presented itself to me in the form of mushrooms. And this was I did 3 mushroom journeys. The third one is when I experienced oneness.
Mm.
Um, and they were definitely inner work journeys. It's not like taking mushrooms and going to a party.
Right.
Like it was something that was deliberate, intentional. Um,
Did you
and
have like
so
a guide or a facilitator with you? Was it like a heavy dose, kind of light dose? Like, what was
at
your?
that time, I didn't have any kind of a guide or anything. Like
Mhm.
I was, and I'm not going to say I suggest that. I
Sure.
think that having a guide, you will find greater results so much faster. Someone who understands what they're doing. Um, but at that time, I did not. I took like a 4 gram dose, and so it's a pretty heavy dose. Um, but it's so funny. Like I remember kind of when the journey started. I was laying on my back and like starting to kind of experience the sensation of colors and all the things, and it was almost like this portal opened up in front of me,
Mm.
and someone on the other side kind of reached their hand out to me and was like, hey, do you want to take this journey? And now
Mm.
truth is, for me, and it's funny, I've shared this with other people too, but the medicine has always talked to me. I've always had conversations. Like it's always been my guide. And so like it kind of guided me, we'll just say, all the way through the different dimensions and densities, all the way to oneness is what it was.
Mm.
It felt like. And once I got there, and I would say that was kind of my awakening
Yeah.
moment of remembering who we are. Like I felt it, I remembered it, and I remember asking the guide, the medicine, like, how many times have I woken up?
Hmm.
Like, and the medicine just was like, you ask that every time. And I just laughed so hard, literally for like 30 minutes. Of course, the mushrooms help with that. But yeah, that was the first time, and it was just, um, yeah, there, just feeling there was no separation, and how everything is connected, and yeah, it was incredible.
Mm.
And now, after practicing, to me, like the those medicine journeys give you a glimpse into a greater awareness.
Mm.
But it's still on us to practice and
Mhm.
put into practice that awareness that we gained during those medicine journeys. So, for example, when I'm working with individuals, I talk a lot about identity because that, to me, is kind of your overall quote unquote frequency. Okay, so if you are experiencing a lot of fear, mentally, emotionally, like physically, like you're in the frequency of fear, if you will. But in these plant medicine journeys, we're working to shift those frequencies, or we could just say in psychology terms, your identity.
Mm.
So you're shifting out of that fear identity into more forgiveness,
Right.
acceptance, gratitude, love, freedom. Like, and we can just keep going. And so to me, it can help someone go through that whole process of identity shifts in so much faster, but you still have to do the work, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. No, it makes me think of like we were talking about perspective earlier, right? It's almost like this ability to go above onto the mountain for a minute and say, "Hey, here's what's here," right? And like you have to work then to get back there, but like you had that experience, and so you know something is like deeper and true. Like I think even for me, the first time I feel like I had one of those experiences was strangely enough, even though again I'm not supporting the use of alcohol per se, but was one of the times that I was first exploring with alcohol and got like fairly drunk, and but like still fairly lucid, but was like, oh, like this other part of me is coming out that I kind of wish I was a lot more. Like why is it? Because if I can be that way when I'm drunk, I'm sure I can be that way without it, right? And so it gave me this kind of like this openness to like some other part of myself that I
Yes.
wanted to be, that I had a hard time being for some reason. I couldn't quite figure out why, and that led me to go to therapy and led me to go to other things as well, like across my journey. But it was that oneness, that openness to experience. And that wasn't an experience of oneness, but that experience of something different that opened my mind up to that. And it reminds me, I was talking a little earlier with Mike Israetel, and he was sharing about his like experience with ADHD. It was very crippling for him, and how when he got onto Adderall, he went to from like being a flunking student to like getting a scholarship to, going to the school and like realizing it was, and then the medication stopped working for him. It started giving him a lot of anxiety, and so he had to like figure out how to do it basically without the medication. And over time, figured out how to actually like build his attention up, build all these different pieces of himself up, because he knew what was there somewhere, right? There was some way for him to be this way, and I do feel like those perspective shifts, even if they are only for a moment or a glimpse, can be so powerful and profound for us, because we know there's something else out there that we can reach or achieve or experience.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm. Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, sorry. I kind of was thinking a couple things at the same time you were talking, so
No, yeah, go ahead. You're good.
I was floating. I don't know. I was kind of thinking about this idea of the fear frequency and how someone listening to this might not quite understand my definition of fear.
Sure.
And to me, it is separation. It's that I'm afraid that I'm going to be hurt by somebody else or whatever. It's seeing everything as so separate, where love is this desire for unity,
Mm.
and once you kind of experience that oneness of love through everything, it's like, and you start practicing that in your, dropping again your attention down to your heart chakra and experiencing in the body, and that connection to everything, and that connection is love. And like, if you've never experienced that, but I remember, I guess what brought me to that was thinking, if there was a Christian listening to this episode, like, I always thought that I was in love and experiencing that, when I didn't realize that I was experiencing fear. Because
Mm.
if there has to be someone better or someone worse, and we're not all equal, and like everyone, like that, when there isn't unity, there isn't love.
Yeah.
And so, sorry, I totally took that
No.
a different way,
No.
but I just, sorry, I kind of have
Oh
a
no, you're
head of
totally
brain.
good. Yeah, I wasn't going there with any particular like intent or anything. I was more just
Yeah.
sharing, and I think that's great. And I would actually really love to drill down into that even more so, because you mentioned earlier, one of the things that started happening for you as you were a Christian counselor was basically, it sounded like the experience from your clients and like hearing their experiences as well. I'm sure dealing with your own like within the church was a big part of what led you to like leave the church. And I was wondering, if I know you obviously have to respect confidentiality and such, but like what kind of things were you seeing that made you start questioning or saying, hey, maybe there's something else going on here that's not so great, or that I need to separate myself from this to find something different or better? Like what were you seeing or hearing, or what was that like for you?
Yeah. Well, so in cognitive behavioral therapy, okay, CBT, that's like one of the gold standards for counseling. If you ever go to counseling, they're probably going to talk about CBT. In CBT, they have this list of the top 10 cognitive distortions. Okay? Cognitive distortions meaning problematic thinking patterns. Okay? And so this was something I was trained in, and I was practicing myself to step out of those. But the number one that is on the page is black and white thinking, all or nothing thinking. And again, what is that? That is what we were talking about with the devil card. It's, we're sitting in duality, of this right or wrong or good or bad. When if we can kind of bring all that together into oneness and unity, all of that duality, all that black and white thinking, all the all or nothing thinking, all of that, we feel such a calm and peace inside. Um, and that's what I was helping people with over and over and over in this experience of perfectionism, right? Because it's kind of like that is the root as well. It ties right into black and white thinking, and it's like, you know, I have to either be perfect or I'm a failure. And so, but we know we can't be perfect up here, but there's a disconnect. I feel like I still should be. And so we've got this bar so high that we will never reach, you know, and so we live our entire lives feeling like we're less than, we're not enough, right? And that not enoughness was what I was seeing over and over and over and over. And I was just like, this, number one, it's not healthy for these people. They're experiencing a lot of disease and just, you know, it was miserable, right? And so that was the very thing that it was just like I was coming to this awareness of just seeing this over and over, and then how in the church this was in some ways it's so hard because unless you've experienced it yourself being in the Christian church, it's like they may say that it's like you don't have to be perfect, you don't have to be these things, but then at the same time you're judged for it by everybody you're around. If you've got an issue, you tend to be just judged like, why haven't you figured this out yet? You know? And so it's an amazing place for a community, but for healing, I didn't find that was the greatest place for healing.
Yeah. Well, it's such an interesting dichotomy. And what came up for me as you were talking about it was when, you know, I was in the church, it was a lot of like, okay, yeah, like everybody like sins and you make mistakes and you do these things and you ask for forgiveness and like you're never going to be perfect, you're always going to be imperfect, but at the same time, to your point, it's like you're meant to be striving for perfection in some way, right? And then it becomes this thing of like, well, all you have to do is like, you know, ask God to forgive you and you're saved and like you're good, but like, you know, if you keep doing the thing, then maybe you're not really asking for repentance, so you're not actually doing the thing right, and so it becomes this like endless game of like suffering where you're like kind of walking on this like spiritual eggshells in a sense of like, am I doing the right thing? Have I repented enough times? Have I actually made the change, or do I just have to like make sure I ask for forgiveness one last time right before I die and before I can fuck up again? Like,
Yeah,
what if I forget?
exactly.
Right? There's like so much like existential dread that starts going on in the brain.
And think about
That
how much fear that is right there. Just
time,
right.
yeah.
Like it's this constant fear that I'm not enough and feeling.
Hmm.
So anyway, to your point, but yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely.